a little bit about my background. I studied nutrition. I studied nutrition in the UK with a focus on clinical nutrition and diabetes in particular, hence the talk on diabetes and nutrition. But, I wanted to make it kind of, I don't know how, if this is like really relevant to the people here, if people are struggling with diabetes or they know anyone with diabetes. So, we'll talk about diabetes a little bit, but I'll also just try to keep it general, just general healthy eating tips for a balanced diet, and a healthy diet, just for the general public, because actually there's not so much difference, in the diet of a diabetic person to the diet of what we should actually be eating as people even without diabetes, just for good health. So I don't want to like just be talking. Like, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to like butt in at any time and just ask. And I'll just try to go through things slowly so that everybody can follow and that everybody is happy. Just stop me if I'm going too fast. All right, should I make a start?
Sure.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
So
Thank
I studied in the UK, and I'm a registered associate nutritionist. So this is our AFN is like the Association for Nutrition. They're like our like registering body, if as such. Like, if you want to be a qualified nutritionist, a registered nutritionist, you want to practice in like a hospital or something like that, you have to be registered with them. And just an important part before I kind of dive into the presentation, there's like a lot of nutrition advice out there on the internet, on TV, and it's really important that you take nutrition advice from people who are qualified and who have gone through the correct scientific curriculum, and who can give you the correct information, because you see things on TV or on like Twitter or whatever about like, oh, you can do like a juice fast for a week, and like lose so much weight, and they recommend things that aren't necessarily healthy or balanced or good for you. So it's important to take nutrition advice from qualified sources, people who have been through like an accredited program, and who are registered and validated in that way. I'm sure New York has like, I'm not sure what it is in New York or in the States, but I'm sure they have a board where people need to register that they're nutritionists after they've studied in university or something like that. So it's important to keep a lookout for that stamp. So I'll go into just a little bit of a brief explanation about diabetes, and then we can kind of understand how it ties into nutrition. Hi there, I think we have a new participant. I was just introducing the topic of nutrition and diabetes, and if you guys want, you're free to just call out at any time and ask any questions or butt in whenever you like. All right, so hopefully you guys can still see my slides. So basically, diabetes is a problem when there's a buildup of sugar in the blood. And so if you can see in this picture, what normally is supposed to happen is, okay, so you have a woman, she's eating an apple, for instance, right? So this apple, it breaks down into sugar. And basically, like many of the things that you eat, even if it's bread, right? Bread is not necessarily sweet or sugary, but these things, they break down into sugar. And that sugar goes into your blood, right? And so what happens now, you don't want a lot of sugar in your blood. This causes problems. This causes diabetes, right? When you have high blood sugar. So what your body is supposed to do is your cells are supposed to sort of suck in that sugar and take it in so that it can use that sugar as energy. All right. And what unlocks this process is something called insulin. You guys must have heard of insulin before, right? So this is what a lot of like type 1 diabetics, they have to inject, right? Because their bodies don't make insulin. So they just have like high sugar in their blood all the time, right? And with type 2 diabetes, which is the more common one, that's when people, for whatever reason, either they kind of lose sensitivity to insulin, or over time their body like produces less of it. All right, so that's kind of what we might focus on a bit more, because that's the more common type of diabetes that adults kind of develop later on in life. And so insulin is what allows your cells to use that sugar for energy. And diabetes is when that insulin is not able to do its job. All right, so the glucose just hangs around in your blood, and the blood sugar is really high. All right. And so basically, in terms of healthy eating for diabetic patients, and even just for the general public, like I said in the beginning, There's not that much of a difference, you know, in terms of the principles. So have you guys seen this before? Have you guys heard of the glycemic index before? No.
No, I don't. I didn't.
All right, that's
Um,
fine. Don't worry. I'll explain it to you. So glycemic index, I'll just call it GI because it's a bit shorter. Glycemic index is when, let's say I eat an apple, all right? So an apple is naturally, it's my blood sugar will go up, right? Because I ate that thing. Or let's say I eat a piece of bread, right? My blood sugar will go up. But for each food, it's different, right? So it's different if I eat like a chocolate bar versus if I eat a bowl of oatmeal, right? There's going to be a difference in the kind of spike that my blood sugar is going to go through, right? So if you can see on the screen here, they give an example of like cakes, ice cream, like processed foods, white bread. These things on the red line, they spike your blood sugar really high, all right? And if you see the green line, right, you have like basmati rice, vegetables, lentils, whole grain bread. There's a spike over here. You can see that there's a little bit of a spike, but it's a more sort of controlled spike, a kind of like lower spike, right? And this is ideally what we aim for in the foods that we eat. We don't want this huge spike and then this crash, right? That's not what we want. And this is actually when your body goes through this process enough times of like having a really high spike and then coming down, this actually causes type 2 diabetes because your insulin response gets worn out, right? And your body stops producing the kind of insulin that it needs, or it becomes less sensitive to the insulin that's there already, okay? So this is what we kind of aim for, this sort of slow, the slow, like low curve, all right? And so glycemic index, like each food has a different glycemic index. So if you can see here, a low GI is below 55, a medium GI is like between 55 and 69, and a high GI is above 70, right? And you have charts like this on the internet, and you have books which like just, you know, detail like what each food's glycemic index is, all right? So it's a really useful tool to think in terms of like how much is this food going to spike my blood sugar, but it's not everything. And I want to point out some things to you. So what's an example? Can anyone find an example of like a really good low GI food on this chart?
vegetables. I was having a hard time reading it, but I saw the
Oh, okay.
line of vegetables and it was the color green, and so I said leafy green vegetables.
Yeah, so that's great. So we have like broccoli, which has a GI of 10, right? So that's great. That fits like our low GI criteria. And broccoli is really healthy. It has like minerals and vitamins and things that we need, right? And you also have, you know, it doesn't have to be like in the tens to be healthy. You have like yogurt, right? It's like 14. You know, anything below 55 is considered low, right? So even like a kiwi fruit, which people consider sugary, right? It's actually not like, it's not a high GI food, right? But I want to point your attention to something else. Look at this chocolate bar. What category of GI does that fall into? Is that high, medium, or low?
Hi, I think so. Oh, depends.
It's
I can see.
49. So
Oh,
chocolate
in
bar has a
between?
GI of 49.
Very,
But what's
very
the
high.
deal? Because it's like, it's a low GI food. So like, does that mean it's healthy or like, what's going on there? Does anyone like have any ideas?
Is it because it's combined with fat or no?
Yeah, you're on a really good track. So there are different things that affect GI, right? So the fact that, you know, some things might be combined with fats, that actually lowers the GI of a food, right? The processing of a food affects its GI. If you heat it up, that can also affect its GI. So there's like very sort of minute things that can affect a food's GI. And so the point that I wanted to highlight was that, you know, GI is not everything, right? I can't say like, oh, chocolate bar is low GI, so I'm just going to spend my life eating chocolate bars and then I'll be healthy, right? Obviously, everyone can see the problem with this, right? So there are other things that contribute to like a healthy diet and getting a mix of foods that are healthy. It's not just GI alone. Another thing to consider is that, you know, we don't really eat foods in isolation, right? I don't just eat like a huge plate of broccoli by itself, right? Usually like broccoli with like bread and maybe chicken or like, you know, it's you eat things together, right? This also affects a food's GI as well. So it's important to keep that in mind that GI can be a really useful measure of how much a food might spike your blood sugar, but it's not everything, right? It's not the be all end all of health, all right? Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on? You guys good with GI?
I have a question,
Yeah, go for it.
and that is, so I want to understand the different, okay, so there's fat and there's sugar in a chocolate bar. So are you saying that the sugar goes into the body slower because the fat is present, or are you saying that it's a bad combination? That's what I'm
So,
not
okay,
understanding.
so we're going to talk about actually fats in a minute. I'm going to get back to like good
Okay.
fats and bad fats. So stay tuned for that. But it is true that fats actually decrease the sugar spike, but it's not, obviously it would depend on the fat. Like, so if it's a good fat coupled with a sugar, then that's like a good thing, and we'll talk about good fats and bad fats in a bit. But if it's a bad fat, like, I don't know, palm oil or something, right, in a chocolate bar, then you just have two combinations of, like, then you have one combination of two really bad things, right? So it might sort of mitigate the spike, but you're still getting, like, palm oil or whatever in your system, which isn't great, right?
Saturated fat.
Yeah, saturated fat. Does that make sense?
That helps. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Okay, so have you guys seen something like this before? There must be like an American version of it. Yeah, like this is the UK version. Sorry, I was just saying to the ladies before you came that I studied in the UK, so this is kind of like UK based, but it's all based on the same science. So you don't really find
Yes.
that much difference between countries. Um, so yeah, this is
Wouldn't it be great if we were educated in it more, more often?
yeah. I guess it's something that's a universal problem. Like nutrition education tends to be lacking, and especially we live in a world where there's like lots of fast food and like processed food, and it's just kind of the way we live now, isn't it? So that education is really important.
Yes.
So okay, so here's the Eat Well guide. So basically, this gives you an idea of the kinds of proportions of different food groups that you should have on your plate in a meal, right? And they say that, okay, if you can't achieve this ratio in one meal, then at least try to achieve this ratio over a day, right? Or over a week, right? Just make sure that this is the kind of proportions that you guys are getting, all right? So I'll go through each kind of food group. Um, and we can kind of, yeah, we'll take it from there. So the main food group, well, one of the main ones is actually carbohydrates. Does that surprise anyone? Are you guys surprised at that?
Um, I think I would be a little bit actually,
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
but um, well, I don't know, maybe, well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because carbohydrates include fruits and vegetables, huh? Or in
It's
this
true.
case, no, right? Anyway, I
They
don't know.
actually do. You're right. They actually do include fruits and vegetables. I think maybe for this diagram, they kind of like separated them to make it clearer to people that they need to be eating like fruits and vegetables, like kind of like on a separate category of their own. But you're right. Like they doing carbohydrates, like fruits and vegetables do like contain carbohydrate. The reason I was asking was because there's been a lot in the media about like how carbs are evil. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Like everyone's always like, or a lot of people are like, oh, carbs are so bad. I'm trying to like cut out all carbs. I'm trying not to eat carbs anymore. They've gotten like a really bad reputation for themselves. And it's kind of like the same deal with fats. You hear people saying like, oh, fats are so bad. But the thing is, with fats, there's good fats and bad fats. With carbohydrates, there's good carbohydrates and there's bad carbohydrates. And you want to go after the good ones, right? So do you guys know what we would consider like good carbohydrates versus like bad carbohydrates? Any ideas?
Well, anything that is refined is supposed to be bad, or something like processed, like white bleached flour is not good. But if it's a brown rice or whole grain, then it seems good. And the
Yeah.
apples and stuff, they do have a carbohydrate, and that is complex or something, and it's supposed to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
good.
good. So, yeah, that's definitely true. So there's a difference between like complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. And the complex carbohydrates, they take longer for your body to kind of break down. And that's why you don't get that like huge sugar spike and crash, right? When you have those, you get that like sort of more controlled and slow sugar spike. And so examples of complex carbohydrates are like whole grain bread, right? Rye bread. Um, what else is there? There's some in the picture as well, like whole grain cereals, oats, right? Couscous, even pasta is like, it's like a low GI carbohydrate. And so these are the kinds of carbohydrates that we want to get in our diet. And these are the kinds of carbohydrates that this diagram is referring to, right? It's not referring to like eating like, I don't know, 50 slices of white bread, right? Like a day. I think they have like Wonder Bread in the States, right? Like that really, really like, it's like barely even bread. It's just like, it's like rubber or something. I remember as kids, we always wanted to eat Wonder Bread. And my mom was like, no, that stuff is so bad for you. You guys are going to eat whole wheat. And we hated whole wheat bread. We were not interested in that. But yeah, so those are the kinds of things that we want to go after, right? Starchy carbohydrates, fibrous carbohydrates, right? And this also actually like fiber, you find it in like oats, in whole grains, in rye bread. Fiber actually keeps you full, right? So if you eat fibrous carbohydrates, you'll actually eat less because it satiates you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
And then, as you guys mentioned, like fruits and vegetables, they come under carbohydrates, it's true, but like they've kind of given them a section of their own just because of all the research that's been done about the value of fruits and vegetables in prevention of diabetes, in prevention of cancer, in prevention of pretty much like any disease that you could think of. They're just so important in terms of their vitamin content, their mineral content. And in the UK, they say like at least 5 fruits and vegetables a day. I'm not sure like if they say the same in the US, like just like get as much as you can, basically.
Yes. At least maybe one per meal, but more preferably 2 per meal, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, definitely.
Servings.
Definitely. That's absolutely correct. And you can see that like, I don't know, like at least from our background, like coming from a Pakistani background, an Asian background, there's like kind of like an emphasis on meats, right? Normally you would see like the meat in this fruit and vegetable section, and then the carb maybe might stay as it is, and then the vegetables might be like this little sliver here where like which is reserved for oil and spreads, right? That tends to happen. And so it's kind of like we need a shift towards a more plant-based diet, more fruits, more vegetables. These are ultimately what give us the vitamins and minerals that we need. Yeah.
Is sourdough fit into the breads anywhere? Do you know?
Yeah, sourdough would be like it's under bread. It would be in the carbohydrate section.
But is there anything better about sourdough versus just a regular whole grain bread?
Um, I think they really emphasize wholemeal bread because wholemeal is like it's even different from whole grain. Whole grain, I think there's still some process of refinement that the bread goes through, whereas whole grain is like the grain is complete and it still has its shell. Sorry, whole meal still has its shell, and so that's what they really emphasize because of its fiber content. I think sourdough has more to do with like the yeast and the fermentation.
Right, I just didn't know if that did anything. Because how
I'm not
sometimes like
sure.
yogurt is like a little bit better for you if you have like trouble with milk. I
Yeah,
guess that's different though. It's not, I
I
don't
think I think actually what you might be referring to is like the probiotics or like
know. Okay,
prebiotics, the bacteria inside.
you're right.
Um,
You're right.
yeah, I think that's what it's in relation to, like your gut health, right? Because those like bacteria, that's like good bacteria. The more you eat, the better for your gut it is.
Right.
To be honest, I don't know that much about sour bread, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has those benefits because of the way that it's cultured and because of the way that it's made.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, then we have like protein, so like pulses, fish, eggs, meat, right? So it's not just meat-based proteins, it's like pulses, beans, these kinds of things as well. They also contribute to your protein intake, chickpeas, right? And so this is like a small sliver of the chart, right? Like I was saying before, we tend to like eat a lot of meat, but it should be less and it should be more focused on vegetables and kind of like just a little bit of these things. All right. And they also recommend fish. Fish is highly recommended, like oily fish. Do you guys know what oily fish is? Like what kinds of fish fall into there?
The skin, I know the skin of the fish is where the oil might be.
So yeah, so oily fish is like salmon, mackerel, sardines. Those are what you call oily fish. And then you have white fish, which is basically like cod or like what's that other one? Tilapia, I think it's called, that people eat, right? Cod, tilapia,
Yeah.
I think haddock as well is another white fish, right? So they have different properties. Both are good for you, but the oily fish especially is really good for like your brain health. It has something in it called polyunsaturated fatty acids, and those are like the good fats that we want because they actually, contrary to the name, right? You might think, oh, fat, that means it's going to like build up in my arteries and cause a heart attack. Some fats actually take the fat out of your arteries, right? And fit like oily fish contains that kind of good fat. All right. So that's an important protein to get. Over here in the UK, they recommend at least 1 portion of oily fish per week. And for diabetics, it's actually 2 portions of oily fish per week. So it's actually very beneficial in terms of health. And then we have like dairy and alternatives like soy milk or, almond milk or whatever other alternatives there are. And ideally you want to choose like semi-skimmed milk as opposed to going full fat, just for like, lowering the fat content and being mindful of that. One thing I wanted to mention is that, often when they take fat out of a product, right, you can't just like take fat out and leave it, right? Like you have to replace the fat with something, right? Otherwise you won't have like a product. So what they do is they take the fat out and they put sugar in, right? So this is something to be mindful of, like looking at food labels and things like that, if I buy this low fat yogurt or this low fat cream cheese, I mean, when you take the fat out of a food, it impacts the taste, right? And so they want to make it taste good, they just pump it full of loads of sugar, right? So low fat is not necessarily the healthier option. You would need to look at the food label and see what the ratio of sugar and fat is in there and what the content is like. Because low fat foods are like very, very popular. And like, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing. Some people, they need the reduced fat, right? But what you don't want to do is take out the fat and then like make up for it with the amount of sugar that you're eating, right? So that's something that's important to look out for as well.
Yeah, that is good to know. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. No worries. Obviously, like 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, right? You need your liquids, you need to stay hydrated. And then, oops, I forgot oils and spreads. Yeah, so like, and like in our cooking, at least in Pakistani cooking, we use a lot of oil, right? It's not good. You're not supposed to cook with that much oil. And if you do cook with oil, then you need to use unsaturated fats like rapeseed oil, olive oil, right? These oils are healthier for you, rather than, I think like palm oil is like the worst oil that you can use, palm oil, and like unfortunately butter as well. Like, we can't like slather on the butter. It has to be like controlled amounts of butter. Yeah, but you can use these in small amounts. That's okay. And then, what didn't even make it onto the chart was like all that delicious stuff like chocolate and chips and cupcakes and all of that. It's left out of the chart so that you can see that it's like a treat. It's something that you don't have as part of your everyday diet or routine. It's something that you have, on the one-off occasion and stuff like that. And then over here, this is just like the calorie breakdown. This is the average calorie intake. Obviously, each person is different depending on their size, their height, their weight, things like that. But in general, the average calorie intake for women is like 2,000 calories per day. And for men, it's 2,500. So that's what they base food labels off of. I'm not sure if it's like that in the States. I just have to have like a disclaimer there. I'm not sure. You would have to check the food labels. Over here, thankfully, the food labels are like very well kind of regulated, and we have like a traffic light system where you can just kind of look straight at the label. I don't know if you guys can see here in the upper left corner. You look straight at the label and like the levels of fat and the levels of sugar and things like that. I'm not sure if it's like that in the States. I don't remember it being that way, but I think you still have like a breakdown and you can like see how many grams of fat and like sugar and everything is in the food. So it's important to just keep an eye on those as well, like the food labels, to know what you're eating. All right, is that okay? Is this table okay with everyone? Does anyone have any questions before I move forward?
That's great.
All right, great. All right, so in terms of diabetes, the main strategy that dietitians use, nutritionists use, is to actually to lose weight and to maintain that lost weight. And research shows that if a diabetic person loses up to 15% of their body weight, they can actually put the diabetes back into remission. And this is because having extra fat tissue in your body, it really it impacts the way that insulin is allowed to work. And so if you get rid of that fat, then insulin is able to work a lot more efficiently, and it drives the diabetes back into remission. But it's important for all of us, like, regardless of whether we have diabetes or not, to maintain a healthy weight and to get exercise, especially like, well, over here, we're in a lockdown. I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but we're just working from home. We're just sitting on our computers all day long. We're not moving, right? Like from morning to evening, we're just, sitting, and it's really bad. Like, and we're eating a lot too, because there's nothing else to do, right? So we're like cooking up all these like interesting recipes and things, and we're just like stuffing our faces and not really moving. I mean, myself anyway. So it's important that we get this exercise, and we try to like maintain a healthy weight. So how to sort of maintain weight or lose weight if there is excess weight. So there's restriction of energy intake, right? So you don't have to like starve yourself, but if you can like cut out a certain amount of calories a day, maybe you want to start small, maybe you want to start with like 100 calories, 200 calories, right? And you can work up to like maybe a deficit of 500 calories per day, right? To if you want to lose weight, because basically the way that it works is energy in versus energy out, right? When those two things are balanced, you have weight maintenance, right? But if you have more energy intake than you have energy output, then there's weight gain, right? And then weight loss is basically maximizing your energy output and minimizing your energy input, right? And so it's like a very basic kind of like scale kind of thing that you can understand. So yeah, restricting energy intake is important for diabetics that are trying to lose weight. Reducing total and saturated fat intake. So do you guys know the difference between like saturated fat, unsaturated fat? What do you guys know about that?
Some of saturated, I guess, means that it solidifies at room temperature. Besides that, I don't know anything more.
Do you guys know where saturated fat comes from? Like, what's its source normally?
Probably animal.
Would it come from animal source more?
Yeah, generally speaking, it does. It tends, I mean, you have some saturated fats that come from like coconut, for instance, but yeah, generally speaking, it comes from animals. So like butter, animal fat, red meats, right? These are things that are really, really high in saturated fat, and we're advised to limit our saturated fat intake, which we're going to talk about when I move on to the fat slides. So yeah, for now, it's just reducing total and saturated fat intake. And to maintain weight, as we said before, increasing fiber intake actually helps you to control your appetite. And so the more fiber you eat, the more it regulates your appetite, and the more it prevents you from like snacking and things like that if you eat like a good dose of fiber per day. And at least in the UK, like adults are not meeting their daily fiber intake, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same in the States. So at least 30 grams of fiber a day is recommended. And most people are struggling to get that. So it's really important. It's a really important staple, and it helps with so much. It's good for digestion, and it's good for like just regulating appetite in general. And the last one is to increase physical activity. So they recommend at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per day, all right? Or 150 minutes per week. And this is like the bare minimum, right? So that's like exercising for 30 minutes, like 5 days a week. But ideally, we would want to do more than this. And moderate intensity is like, when you're walking briskly and you can like feel your heart start to kind of pump, and you can feel your body like getting a bit warm. That's what you want, right? It's not like kind of going for like a really relaxed, like leisurely walk. It's more like, putting in a little bit of effort, right? It's not like you have to run a marathon, but you want to like walk briskly, put in some effort so that your heart rate gets up and your body becomes warm, and you start to burn a little bit of calories and burn a little bit of energy. All right, is that clear?
Yeah,
and there's many kinds of exercise that you can do, and like people ask like what's the best exercise to do, how should I exercise, and it's honestly just whatever you can do that you can be consistent with. So for some people it's going for a walk, for other people it's like going on their treadmill in the house, for other people it's swimming. Whatever works for you, just do that, because then you can be consistent in it, right? Like there's no point in like getting a gym membership and knowing that like you're never gonna go, but you might go for a walk, right? Like then just go for a walk. Go for a walk and go for like a, you know, a good 30-minute brisk walk each day. That's better for you than like getting the membership that just kind of sits there, right? So it's whatever works for you, whatever you can be consistent in. All right. Is that okay? Can I move on, or were there any questions?
Awesome. Very awesome. Yeah, no, I can't think of anything, but thank you so much for
Oh, you know, you're
this talk.
welcome. It's
I
my
needed to
pleasure.
remember all of this and
No,
put it
same
in front
here.
of my mind.
Same here, honestly, because with the
Totally.
lockdown, it's just so difficult to get this physical activity in. It's been really hard. Um, so yeah. Okay, I have carbohydrates next. All right. So at least over here in the UK, I'm not sure about the US, but I would not be surprised. They have products specifically for people with diabetes. And actually, like we're told to avoid those, A, because of the sugar thing that I was telling you, like okay, sorry, not because of sugar. They take out the sugar, but they like put fat, they put more fat in. Because you know, whenever you take something out, you have to replace it, right? So what are they going to replace the sugar with, right? So you don't want to like do a disservice to yourself by avoiding sugar, but then getting like tons of fat, right? That you don't want. And honestly, like it just tends to be a scam in most cases. They just kind of like make these products very expensive. You end up buying them, and like, you know, they don't really do much for you. So we're told to avoid those. Um, Carbohydrate intake should be spread out throughout the day. So you don't like want to do like a binge, like when you first like wake up in the morning, like eat tons of carbohydrates, right? And then like do vegetables for the rest of the day, or like only like, I don't know, fish for the rest of the day or something like that, right? Things should be spaced out, things should be balanced, including carbohydrate intake. We said GI, we talked about GI, right? And we remembered that it's not, you know, you have some high GI things. For instance, what was high GI on the list? I want to find an example of something that's high GI but actually healthy. Um, for instance, like watermelon, right? Watermelon is quite high GI, but we know that watermelon has like minerals and nutrients and things like that inside of it. So it's important to just keep a balanced mind open, right? GI isn't everything, but it is something that's important. Um, they recommend sweeteners in moderation. So there's like definitely like a safe level of sweeteners that you can have, but you don't want to sort of cross that level. So if somebody is struggling with sugar intake, they have like, do you guys have Splenda? You guys have Splenda there? They use Splenda, right? Like Canderel, Splenda.
Yeah, but there's healthier. Yes, however, there are healthier types of sweeteners such as stevia, monk
Yes.
fruit,
Mm-hmm.
other sweeteners as well.
Definitely. So the plant-based ones are more healthy, and you can use those like in place of sugar. If somebody's struggling with their sugar intake, you can use things like stevia. I'm not sure what Splenda is based off of. I thought Splenda was also plant-based, but I could be wrong. But yeah, you can use these in moderation in small amounts, um, and it can be useful for weight reduction as well if anybody, you know, happened to be struggling with that. And as we mentioned before, you know, high fiber carbohydrates are so important. They keep you satiated, they keep you full, right? If you could get like, you know, those oat granola bars or something like that. Obviously ones that are like not high in sugar. My mom actually just makes her own granola with oats, and then you can control what goes into it, right? You know exactly what's in there. So these are good snacks to have. Each meal and each snack should have some like high fiber carbohydrate, and that will help you to meet that sort of 30-gram target. All right. Any questions about carbohydrates before I move on? All right. Okay, fruits and vegetables, you know, we kind of went over it in the chart. And, you know, another really important aspect of fiber is that it decreases the rate of glucose absorption. So remember we saw that that spike. We said we don't want that spike, right? It helps to kind of like neutralize that spike and just like keep it low and slow, right? That's what you want, low and slow. And we mentioned before that it's, you know, preventative towards cardiovascular disease, that's heart disease, diabetes. We want to get at least 5 portions a day. And they say that, you know, a small glass of fruit juice per day is allowed for diabetics. That's okay, but obviously you wouldn't want to exceed that because of the sugar content. Do you guys know the difference between like, okay, at the end of the day, like whether you squeeze the juice or whether you just eat it as a whole fruit, like, surely the sugar is the same. What do you guys think? Do you guys know anything about that?
Well, juice doesn't
Yeah,
have a fiber, so I think taking fiber as a whole fruits is better, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the fiber that's
yes.
included with the fruit, right? So that makes it like, you know, it mitigates that spike and it makes it healthier for you. Whereas if you just drink the juice, you might get like you're gonna get like a bit of a hit there, right? So it's a bit different. You would ideally want to
It
eat the
goes
full
into the
fruit.
blood too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may go into the blood too fast, and it causes the is it the pancreas that creates insulin, and that might
Yeah.
cause it to create too much or something like that.
Yeah. It can
Yeah.
cause you know, when we said that that spike, it can cause like a decrease of sensitivity to insulin, right? So your body needs to keep on making more and more insulin for your body to be able to recognize it and use it, right? So that's not what we want. That's like on the path to diabetes. All right. In terms of protein, we want to ideally reduce red meat, right? So we would want to substitute red meat for things like chickpeas, lentils, beans, pulses. Those are good substitutes. Also avoiding processed meat, so things like salami and like they have like nitrates in them as well, which is not healthy for you. These things that are very like highly processed. We want to like, you know, if you want to eat meat, then like eat the meat like you know, as it is, right? Not like you know, as it's not like in the form of salami or something like that. That's been very highly processed. Um, and so the guidelines are approximately like 56 grams of protein per day for men and 46 grams per day for women. So it would kind of just, it would be like in the proportions that we saw here, right? If you follow this proportion, then you would kind of be on the right track, getting enough of proteins from meat anyway, right? Most people like in the Western world are actually over consuming protein. And, you know, they have like protein bars, protein shakes, and we actually don't know like the long-term kind of effects of this yet, right? We need to see like as generations pass, we'll understand this more fully, but there is like a really huge like upsurge, like there's an excess of protein intake in the Western world, and it might not necessarily be a good thing. We still have to see what the effects of that are going to be.
Yeah,
We also, yeah,
I never did know the amount of protein that we're supposed to have, because years ago when they had the pyramid and everything, the food pyramid, I think they didn't even fill in or the labels in America back in, say, the 80s and stuff. They
mhm.
didn't seem to let you know how much protein we were supposed to be having.
Mm.
So that's good to know. I didn't know that, what you said. What is it, 46 grams for
Yeah,
women
so
or something like
45 grams per day for women, for the average woman. I'll send you guys the slides if I can email them to any address. You guys can have these slides and like, you know, refer to them if you
that?
want. You're free to have that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
You were suggesting the beans and the lentils. What are pulses?
Pulses include beans, lentils, and peas, and they call it legumes. Yeah. So yeah, you want to get those legumes. You know, if you think about it in terms of this, right? So you have, you know, we already know that we should get like 2 portions of fish per week, right? So that's like 2 dinners seen to from the week, right? You can eat like, you know, you wouldn't want to eat in excess of like one serving of red meat per week, right? So then you have like 3 days of the week taken care of. Let's say you have chicken like, I don't know, once or twice, right? And the rest of the days of the week you can do like legumes or like some sort of like stew, or like some sort of bean curry or something like that. You can make use of those for dinner ideas as well. And then there's also like snacks. So like nuts and seeds are really good for snacking. Nuts are also like, they're full of protein, so they actually fill you up. So you would want to have like, you know, like the palm of your hand, right? You would want to have like the amount of nuts that would fit like into the palm of your hand, like one palm, because obviously nuts contain fat as well. So you wouldn't want to like exceed sort of, you don't want to eat like so much nuts that you're exceeding your fat intake, but they also have good properties to them as well. So they recommend like the amount of nuts that would sort of fit in like the palm of your hand. You can have that as a snack. And like seeds as well, like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, they're quite filling as well. So they're good snack ideas. All right, I'm gonna move on from protein if that's okay. Chances are, I just wanted to say on protein that like you don't need the protein shakes and stuff. You're probably getting enough protein from your diet already. Yeah. Okay, so fats, right? We said that there are good fats and bad fats, right? And obviously, like the bad fats are in processed foods like chips, like French fries, these kinds of things. And total fat should be less than 35% of your total energy intake. So if you picture your total energy intake and you like imagine a sliver of like 35%, you shouldn't be exceeding that in terms of the fat that you're getting, right? And saturated fat, which we mentioned before, like animal fat, that should be less than 10%, right? So if you imagine like a circle and then like 10% of that circle, right, it should be less than that. You shouldn't be exceeding that for saturated fats. They also give the gram breakdown for anyone who's interested. So it's no more than 30 grams for men and no more than 20 grams for women per day, all right, of saturated fat. So that's like the bad fat, right, as they say, which kind of like is implicated in heart disease and diabetes and these kinds of issues. But we have good fats as well, which are, they call them monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And these kinds of fats, they actually have the ability to remove like fat from your arteries. They remove fat buildup from your arteries. So, you know, in moderation, obviously, you don't want to like go crazy with them, but you know, they're part of a healthy diet as well. And so monounsaturated fats are things like olive oil, avocados, nuts, right? So in moderation, you want to have these things in your diet. They're actually good for you, right? It's not because, you know, just because they're fats, you don't want them, right? They're bad. No, it's not like that. And the same thing with polyunsaturated fat. So rapeseed oil, if you're going to cook, you know, it's something that you can use rapeseed oil. It's easily, like readily available in the supermarkets. And oily fish, as we mentioned, right? So salmon, mackerel, sardines, right? These are also really good for you and really good for your brain, really good for your heart, right? They just have so many benefits overall. And so we would try to substitute unhealthy fats for healthy fats, right? So for example, if I'm gonna like have an egg in the morning, right? Like it would be better for me to fry my egg in a little bit of rapeseed oil rather than using butter, right? That's just an example. There are other things that you can do as well, other substitutions that you can make to make sure that your fat intake is coming from the healthy fats rather than the unhealthy fats. All right. I have some meal ideas here. So some of this is a little bit South Asian based because I gave this to talk to a bunch of South Asian ladies last time. But anyway, it's still, most of this is still relevant to everyone and quite general. So we have for breakfast, like you could have porridge or oats or muesli. Do you guys have muesli? Do you guys have muesli? Yeah, you do. So with semi-skimmed milk and sliced fresh fruit on top, or you could have it with yogurt, right? Or like an egg with whole grain seeded toast. I love seeded bread. It's so good and it's become really popular here lately, and it just, you know, it tastes great and it's really healthy for you, has some healthy fats in it as well as fiber. So that's a really good breakfast idea. For lunch, you could have like a whole grain seeded bagel with like smoked salmon or tuna with some salad. They have like a really nice appetizing picture here. And there's bean and chickpea salads, right? I think you can buy those even in the grocery store, just like ready-made salads with bean and chickpeas, or vegetable soup with like a whole grain roll. These are some ideas for like a light lunch. For dinner, you could do brown rice. Dal is like a lentil kind of curry, a lentil kind of stew. So you can do like a lentil stew with like brown rice and steamed vegetables or salad. Or you could do a roast or grilled chicken with jacket potato and steamed vegetables. Jacket potato is like this thing in the UK where like you just put the potato in the oven as it is, like those big baking potatoes, you just stick it in the oven and it like kind of like develops this kind of like a crust almost, and then you cut the potato open and you can like, you know, eat it. So you can have that with steamed vegetables and like chicken or something like that. Or you could do like a tomato based curry with like low oil and like a whole grain like chapati or bread or something like that as well. So those are just a few ideas. I'm sure you guys also have ideas, and you know, each family eats different things and each family has, you know, the things that work for them, right? So these were just a few ideas off the top of my head, but you can like adapt this to what works for you at the end of the day. That's the most important thing, that it works for you. All right, so I have a small quiz. No pressure on anyone, but if anyone wants to, you guys can help each other. You can help each other. It's fine. You can cheat. All right, as long as you like cheat just with each other. No Google. All right. So let me go through the quiz. All right. So diabetics should avoid sweet fruits such as grapes and mango. True or false?
False, I would say. I
False,
feel
I
like
think
there's good stuff in the grape
Yeah.
skin.
you're okay to eat sweet fruits, right? You can eat it. It's not bad for you. You're not supposed to avoid fruits as a diabetic because they also include healthy things, right? But obviously fruits would come in a balanced diet where you're also eating vegetables, where you're also eating high fiber, where you're also getting your proteins and your good fats, right? So it would all come together in that picture that we looked at. So yeah, it's false actually that the diabetic should avoid fruit. All right. Okay, number 2, diabetics are advised to seek out diabetic food products. True or false?
False.
Right.
Right, that's false.
Yeah,
right?
I
Because
remember
think,
you saying it, Iman.
yeah, well, it's a scam, isn't it? Because, everything that we discussed, right? It's basically like just healthy eating for the general population. So you can buy fruits, you can buy vegetables, you can buy whole grain bread. Why does it need to have like a stamp on it that says like approved for diabetics, right? Like there's no need for that. They're just trying to make money. Yeah, glycemic index tells you how much sugar is in a certain food. True or false? That's GI. Remember we looked at that that graph? What do you guys think?
I think yes.
That's true.
Yeah. So it tells you how much, and it's not necessarily how much sugar is in the food, but how much that sugar will spike your blood
Yeah.
sugar. Yeah. I think the wording was a bit confusing. That was like a trick question, but basically it's how much the food will spike your blood sugar. All right. So well done, guys. Which of the following are healthy fats? Butter, olive oil, chickpeas.
Not butter.
Not butter.
That's-
Yeah, process
that's
of
for
elimination.
Olive oil.
Yeah, good. So olive oil is a healthy fat. Chickpeas are like chickpeas are actually like more protein, not really so fatty, but olive oil is the answer that I was looking for, right? Healthy fats, olive oil. Great. What is the advice for weekly fish consumption for diabetics? I think we mentioned this.
I thought it was a B.
So it's B, and A is actually the advice for like regular people without like any just the general population.
So interesting. I think all these panels or the slides you've been saying that it's kind of same as between diabetes and other people. And I was wondering like what's the difference? What's the difference? And then this is the only difference.
Yeah,
that you
it's
mentioned.
not that much difference really.
Right.
And obviously I didn't know I don't know how much diabetes relates to each person here. So I did want it to be kind of like something that everybody could benefit from and then find useful, So yeah, there's no such thing as like a diabetic diet. They're just supposed to follow the same healthy eating principles that the rest of the population follows. And obviously, be a bit extra careful with sugar intake. So yeah, well done, guys.
And then only the tricky thing I think is like you think diabetic, they are supposed to be avoiding the sugar, but when they got like a fainting spell or something because their insulin got whacked all of a sudden, then they have to take the sugar, right? Like they have to drink orange juice or something. So that part is quite confusing. Is it good or not? In emergency you have to take it. That kind of thing. That's how I understand.
Yeah, no, but you're so right. And the truth is, at the end of the day, your brain, it needs sugar. Your brain cannot use like anything, like your brain needs glucose, right? So at the end of the day, a certain amount of sugar, a certain amount of carbohydrate is good for you, right? But it's all about keeping that balance, right? That we saw on this healthy eating plate, right? If you have the balance, then you should be okay, right? But you see a lot of diets, they're like, oh, I'm gonna cut out fats or I'm gonna cut out carbs. It's a really big thing to cut out a whole food group. And also what you have to consider is that if you cut out a whole food group, you're going to replace it with something, right? So then the balance is upset, right? If you cut out carbs, then you're going to need extra fats to compensate, extra protein to compensate. Well, then you think, well, is that really healthy? Am I achieving the right proportions of foods that I need to be getting, right? In a healthy, balanced diet. So that's important to consider as well.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure to just have this conversation with you ladies and to just get your input and like kind of have like an interactive session.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Nico, thank
very
you.
much. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.